is a huge problem for
So you'll be putting homeless families into those hotels?
No.
Today you're about to see something you rarely witness in British politics. The Prime Minister himself, Keir Starmer, being pressed hard by a Commons committee.
So can you just a big pinpoint before... what other accommodation precisely are you planning to take over to provide temporary accommodation for families?
Oh, there's lots of housing in many local authorities that can be used, and we're identifying where it can be used. But I mean, look...
Could you give us... have you got any examples you can give us?
No, but I'll
Britain is facing a housing crisis on a scale we've never seen. Thousands of children sleeping in B, and B's parents unable to work, communities falling apart. But when the committee demands concrete solutions, Starmer's response is, well, you'll see for yourself.
Have you got any examples you can give us?
No, but I'll write in and give you details.
Because I could say, certainly in a number of our local authorities, already picking up from around the table, there isn't a lot of spare housing available. If there were, councils would be able to be dealing with it by now.
Over £4 billion spent housing illegal migrants, while British citizens wait years for a home. How do you justify that priority, Starmer? Picture that, living in a cramped B&B room with your children, no kitchen, no privacy, miles from their school. And this isn't rare, it's happening to thousands of families across Britain. So, let's watch. But, please, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Let me know your thoughts about this madness.
Some 45% of households now face a shortfall between the local housing allowance they receive and the rent they pay. Some local authorities top this up, and that's costing them in aggregate £204 million. But when we did a study, the PAC did a study on this way back in January, your officials at DWP could not tell us what effect the freezing of these local housing allowances would have on increased homelessness, because there must be an effect.
Well, I hope that since then they've provided you with a letter or some further evidence. If they haven't, I shall make sure I do after this session. But in relation to homelessness, that is also an initiative led by the Deputy Prime Minister. It's one of the priorities that I've given her, and we have put a lot of money, so £950 million, into more temporary accommodation. That's money straight into local authorities, because often it's a lack of temporary accommodation that is one of the causes of the problem. And overall, we're investing £1 billion in reducing homelessness, and that involves a lot of preventative work. So there is a central focus on homelessness, quite a lot of money being put behind it, but particularly focused on this question of temporary accommodation available to local authorities.
So if I could just stick with homelessness a minute, we discovered that the cladding remediation levy was sucking up so much of developers' funds that the affordable housing starts in London last year, from a fairly low base, I accept, dropped by 90%. That surely is not going to help either the people who are made homelessness or your overall effort to reduce poverty, is it?
No, and we need to drive that up, and that's a problem we've identified and are working on. Obviously, we've got to do the necessary work on cladding. That's got to be financed, but you're absolutely right that we need to turn that number around and drive it up. And so the Deputy Prime Minister is across all these issues of housing.
So one of the hardest things I found in our inquiry was that at June 24, almost 6,000 households with children were being housed in bed and breakfasts, of which almost 4,000 were over the 6-week limit. I just ask you, Prime Minister, to imagine what it's like living B&B with children, especially over when you're having to get out probably at 9 o'clock in the morning and not come back till 6 o'clock in the evening. It must be pretty hard. And of that, so we found that 39,000 households were living in occupying temporary accommodation outside their normal home area. So there will be people living over the 6-week limit with B&Bs, with children, outside their area, trying to struggle to get to schools or work or whatever it is they have to do. I really wonder what would you suggest you can do to begin to solve that problem?
Well, firstly, let me acknowledge it's a real problem, has a huge impact on families, and not just the physical aspects of living in those conditions and the cramped and small circumstances, but also in very many cases, the ability of a child, for example, to get on with their homework and get on at school. So it has not just immediate short-term consequences, it has longer-term consequences, because those same children, once they're struggling at school, will then struggle further down the line in school. That is why it's important that we have put the extra money into temporary accommodation for local authorities to make sure there's a wider range of accommodation. Now, you can't fix this overnight, but you're absolutely right. It needs to be turned around for all the reasons that you've identified, and I absolutely understand.
Thank you.
Very much.
Florence
Thank you,
Esheloni.
Chair.
Just on that, Prime Minister, every homeless child means a child missing school, a child missing out on a vital and welcome breakfast club that your government have committed to, a child or adult missing out on those extra hospital appointments because they don't have a safe and secure home to go to. We are seeing councils at breaking point because of the additional money spent on temporary accommodations. A number of councils declaring bankrupt because of temporary accommodation. This is not sustainable. And I come back to some of the measures that have been taken by the government. So just to ask, do you feel, Prime Minister, then, that we do need to have an urgent reset in local government funding to look at these long-term solutions and key pressures facing councils up and down the country?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, let me say we have put £1 billion into homelessness. That is a huge amount, more than any government's put in for a very, very long time, for precisely the reasons that have been identified by this committee. So there's an absolute commitment on homelessness, and the money was put there in the budget and the spending review to make good on the commitment on homelessness. On the wider question of local authority funding, yes, I do think it needs a review. I've long thought it needs a review, amongst other things. We need multi-year settlements. There are no end of local authorities that say to me, because it's a year-on-year allocation of money, we can't use the money as effectively as we might otherwise be able to do. There are, I don't know how many local authorities who say to me, until you fix, as we are now doing, the no-fault eviction problem, you'll have a homelessness problem, and the bill will be picked up by local authorities. That's why we brought in the provisions to get rid of no-fault evictions. So I absolutely agree with you. This needs review, it needs change. We've started the process of change, and they would be, as it were, the top contenders for me of what we're getting on with to bring about a material change as quickly as we can.
Okay, that's good. So it'll be good to know when we'll expect to see some of those changes and the extra investment, and if it's something that...
Well, the investment in homelessness has gone in already. I mean, the money has been made available.
When do you expect to see a change?
Well, as soon as possible. I've got the Deputy Prime Minister project managing this. We're looking across the numbers. We're getting the money to where it needs to be. But the financial commitment and the political commitment are in place, and the Deputy Prime Minister is pretty focused. I mean, it matters hugely to her. It matters hugely to me. And therefore we're driving it through central government.
I talked earlier about your vision in 3 years. I mean, you're saying in 3 years, in the next year, you'll see a difference. When do you think we'll see the actual difference on the ground? Because
in homelessness or living standards more generally?
Well, on this particular issue, on housing and and temporary accommodation.
Oh, the money going into temporary accommodation, I want to see having immediate effect. In other words, more accommodation available. Now, obviously, it'll take some time to get it into place. But
where is this accommodation going to come from?
This isn't a delayed project. Well, in terms of what can be built, what can be arranged, what can be taken by councils and repurposed is a central focus of what we're doing. But I'm impatient for this change to be driven through. There's no desire on government for this to take any longer than it needs to take to be done effectively and properly.
It's just that we've got Home Office bidding for homes for asylum seekers. We've got councils bidding for
the same
property.
Everyone's
driving up the price, dragging up the cost.
I know, which is why I'm so furious at the last government for leaving tens of thousands of asylum seekers unprocessed with nowhere to live other than accommodation paid for by the taxpayer.
Are you planning to build homes or put people into...
We have to do a number of things. We do have to build, of course.
But that won't happen in the next year.
We have to take over other accommodation. We have to drive down the asylum lists. There is
just a pinpoint before. What other accommodation precisely are you planning to take over to provide temporary accommodation for families?
Oh, there's lots of housing in many local authorities that can be used, and we're identifying where it can be used. But I mean, look.
Can you give us? Have you got any examples you can give us?
No, but I'll write in and give you details.
Because I would say certainly in a number of our local authorities, already picking up from around the table, there isn't a lot of spare housing available. If there were, councils would be able to be dealing with it by now.
Well, exactly, which is why leaving a huge tens of thousands of unprocessed asylum seekers that need to be housed is a huge problem for
So
this
you'll
government.
be putting homeless families into those hotels?
No. We're looking at what accommodation is available, and I'll make sure that we send a detailed letter.
Okay, well, we certainly look forward to receiving that detailed note. I'm sure councils will be breathless.
If you believe this debate needs to be seen by more Britons and not quietly buried by the mainstream media, then help us spread it. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave your thoughts in the comments, and share this with someone who still thinks the government has a genuine plan to fix the housing crisis.